you probably had only negative associations with communism before we start talking about this in class, right? For cultural reasons, and partly because we also remember communism mainly as Stalin and Mao, who both did some really bad things, right? Made some real irresponsible decisions and personal vengeance and things like that. So they tainted the heritage of Marxism and Leninism. Plus, it's a bit of a tiresome ideology to be a fan of, because you need to do revolution. And as we saw, this is not that simple. It's possible. Capitalism keeps generating new problems and new weaknesses. We are living in one right now that could lead to a revolution, but that comes at a high cost. So we could, don't have to, but we could commit heresy and talk about communism without the revolution, right? We could talk about, okay, how can we think about communism without this massive change, without overthrowing capitalism? Marx would say that's not possible, but it is possible. A lot of these ideas and practices of communism, they existed both before Lenin and they existed after him. They exist today. And the most important one that I want to talk about with you today are worker cooperatives. So let's do that. You look quite distracted. I'll try to be a bit more entertaining. So, worker cooperatives. What's a worker cooperative? This is a simple idea. A worker cooperative is an idea that comes from communism. And it's basically a company that is owned and operated by the workers. So instead of having some owner that ultimately tells you what to do, multiple owners, you and your peers, you run the company. It's based on two principles. One is joint ownership. So the company doesn't belong to anyone else but the people in it. You all have a stake in this company. You all have shares in this company. And thus, from a financial side, if it does good, that's good for you, right? Because it's your company here. There's no external control. Nobody in Chicago controls your workplace, only the people in it. And that control is organized in a democratic sense. So all big choices in a cooperative, let's say you're going to make a new product line, or you want to expand to a new market, or you want to open up a new facility, or you, I don't know, you want to change working hours. All these big choices are made democratically. So the board, the directors, they will come, they'll prepare a meeting and they'll propose things with a PowerPoint, and then the workers, they get to either accept or reject this idea. So you democratically decide where you go with this company. When we talk about big decisions, right? That also includes how you handle money. So let's say it's the end of the fiscal year for December. The board comes and said, okay, we made 3 million pesos profit. What are we going to do with it? We propose that we invest it in new machines, right? But we could also just split the money and you all get whatever percentage of this 3 million. And then the people vote if they want to invest in the future or if they want the money now. The opposite is also true. If they have a loss, they also will say, okay, we lost 2 million pesos because of COVID. So either we lower your wages or we fire all people over 60, right? And then the people get to choose which poison do they want to drink. But they will have a choice in that. So that's how they ran. We'll get more into this later. I'm just explaining the concept. Now, they are a communist idea. No doubt this comes from communism. But it doesn't need communism to work. Cooperatives work in any system. They work in communism, and in communism, like in Leninism, they're actually a way to be autonomous from the state, because you rule yourself, not the government. This is kind of in opposition to the planned economy, right? But it also works in a capitalist system. are maybe not capitalist, but in a free market at least. These companies can perfectly exist in a market, just like state companies exist in a market, right? Just like our university exists in an educational market, so can cooperatives insert themselves in any market. And that just works. This happened before communism. This exists today. Thousands of cooperatives exist today in our normal economy. And they can just play along because they, at the end of the day, they make stuff and they sell it, right? And they try to make profit like any other place. The only difference is if you have a massive amounts of cooperatives, millions, then that start changing the economy. If let's say 60% of companies in Mexico would be a cooperative, then we're not really in capitalism anymore. Because capital doesn't mean that much when the people have all the power, right? What rich people want is not so relevant anymore, because most of the economy is not in their hands. So this is a way, if all companies would become cooperatives, then you would become in communism again. But that's not what I'm talking about today. I'm talking about some companies being like that. I'm talking about how this is diffused within our current system. So we're going to forget about the revolution. We're just going to talk about this idea and some other ideas later on. So let's start with, you can interrupt me, by the way, right? If I go too fast, or if you have questions or remarks. We're going to start a bit with history, because that's what we do in the academy. By the way, Hugo is not here. Is he dead? Frozen?
We don't know actually, because he hasn't responded to the messages for WhatsApp group, so we don't know. We hope he's great.
Yeah.
Okay.
He missed last class, so he probably will connect today.
Maybe his laptop died because of the power distortions. Okay, so cooperatives are usually associated with Marx because Marx made a big deal out of them, and he really promoted this idea in all of his books, mainly in Capital, Part 3. But Marx did not invent cooperatives. He just told people that this was a great idea. They existed before him. They existed, for example, the idea goes back to St. Thomas, but the first person to actually do it on a large scale was Robert Owen. I talked about him in the past. He's this capitalist who, just out of curiosity, started creating cities in England, and with factories, etc. And then he basically gave the workers the key. He was like, all right, we're going to play Big Brother and you're in charge. And I'm going to sit in the mountain and see what happens, right? But you guys do this. So this was a bit paternalistic because you have this rich guy basically experimenting with you. But it did work. His city survived. His experiments were successful. So he started these cooperatives. Then later on, I told you about the Paris Commune, when Paris became a cooperative for 70 days. So a city that scale could do it. It was done. But when we talk about theorists, because it's a class and political theory, there's two authors that you might want to check out if you want to learn more about this, about the history of it, that are from before Marx. So one of them is William Thompson, a British socialist. In his 1827 book, Labor Restored, he talks about cooperatives, and his analysis is that the main problem of the working class is that they're divided. They're competing with each other for opportunities, for a better wage, for promotion. And as long as they keep competing with each other, the capitalists will always win, because they will just, competition creates lower prices, right? Also for labor. So he says what the working class really needs to do is start working together. They should start investing together and collaborate. And if they can do that, they will quite easily gain more power in the system. Now, what's the root there? Well, basically, the workers need to gain their own capital. So they have to start saving money, whatever they can. But they have to pool that money. If you individually start saving as a worker to one day own your own taco stand, it's very hard to do that. But if you are with 20 or 30 or 100, you could do it. So his idea is people should start saving, they should start investing together in their own companies, which are cooperatives, and that way they will gain economic power. So there's no revolution here, this just grows via entrepreneurship, basically. That's the idea. And then you get economic wealth for the working class. That was his idea. Another author that says something similar is Sir Francis Bray, I think also British, in his book Labour's Wrongs and Labour's Remedies of 1939. He proposed a very similar thing, although he sees it a bit more organized. He thinks that workers should, if they want more money and if they want to be respected, they should start their own economy, basically. But it should be more integrated. He proposes to make cooperatives in a giant network where they buy from each other, and you just start your own circuit in the economy and you grow that, and your network goes bigger and bigger and bigger until you have the majority of the economy in it. And you exclude the capitalists. You try not to buy from them, so they die and you get all the money inside your system. And then you could end exploitation. You could free yourself from the capitalist yoke. That was his plan. But again, there's no revolution here. Workers just need to start saving money, start investing it, start being entrepreneurs, but not competing with each other. Not one worker who invests and then has the others work for him and get rich. No, if they do it together, then they can all rise up. That's the whole idea behind working together instead of competing. You try to lift the class, not the individual, from poverty. So that's this idea, right? Then you have Marx. He's the next author in line. He promoted it, and after him, everybody liked it, right? Everybody who followed Marx, most people in the communist movement liked it. Gramsci liked it. Rosa Luxemburg liked it. And normal socialists also liked it. The communists liked it because they saw this as a kind of preparation for the revolution. So workers get cooperatives, they get money. With those money, they can buy guns, and then one day we attack, right? The socialists, who were not planning on war, they saw that it as a means of emancipation of the working class to rise up the ladders, to gain political power, to gain economical power, therefore demand other things like medical rights, for example. So this was just a stepping stone to more power for them. One of these socialists is Mr. Bernstein. We're going to talk more on Bernstein when we get to socialism, because he's the guy who is most known for this split from communism. So I don't remember which book this is, but in 1899, this is a real nice quote on cooperatives. He says, he's German, by the way. Whenever in the country these cooperatives exist, people become accustomed to engage in manufacture and production, not just for the sake of profit, but in a fashion that the worker does not have to lay down his manhood at the factory gate, but carry himself with a sense of freedom. And that civility, which a public spirit in a free community based on equal rights breeds. So yes, cooperatives basically are a way for workers to be free and to gain self-respect, right? So you don't need to lay down your manhood at the factory gate. So you don't have to act like various colleagues, that when it's the birthday of your boss, that this is the most significant emotional. It's Abraham's birthday, oh my God. And they then you don't need to lay down your manhood and pretend that, because you control this. So you can see that this can be a tool for people to gain control, gain dignity and money from this, very importantly. So that's the history behind it. I'm talking about it today, right? Sophia, please.
Is this was a way to destruct alienation? You know that Marx talk about how the worker gets in an alienation way to its own work because it doesn't feel it like it is of their own. Like cooperatives has this type of sense, like oh let's destruct
Yes,
alienation.
because as a worker, you're involved in the total product. So normally you only do a mini part of the whole thing, right? Let's say in a car factory, you do headlights, and that's it. You don't make cars, you make headlights of the car. But in a cooperative, you still only do one thing, but you need to have an opinion on everything because you need to vote on it. So as a worker, if you do the headlights of a car, you're also involved in the sales of the car. Not directly, but you do review the results of the sales department at the big meeting. So you identify more with the whole product, also with the sales, with consumers. You're in touch with all of that. So there's less alienation because the work is less divided. But it is divided, but it doesn't feel like that. So yeah, that's one way to fight alienation, because there's more control, there's more relationship to this. And also because you're permanent in these companies. So one of the best books on alienation that I know, I might have talked about it before, but it's called The Corrosion of Character of Richard Sennett. And he writes about bakeries, modern bakeries like Bimbo. And he knows that nobody knows how to bake in this bakery. They're all just people they're all interns, they're all students who just are there for 6 months, and they know how to, like, to make croissants, they need to press button C and button F. And that's all they know. And if button F doesn't work, well, they have no clue what to do now because they cannot bake. So they have no connection to whatever they're doing. This is just like any other job, because they're also going to leave in 6 months. The only person he noticed in this workshop who knew baking was the boss, because he was there permanently. But now everybody gets to be involved in that. So yes, to answer your question,
Yes,
interiors.
but because it also like dignifies the work. I
Mm-hmm.
I know that there's a cooperative that sells juices. It's called Pascual,
Okay.
and I was reading this thing I read like years ago, but the workers actually say that they feel like even if they're not part of all the process, they do feel that they have gained dignity, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that's I think that one of the most important things, like the individual feeling that I'm okay here, that
That's
I'm
the
safe.
plan. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's part of it. So let's talk a bit more about the advantages of them, right? You introduced it well. First, I want to get out of the way two big misconceptions, conservative misconceptions about how cooperatives work. Most commonly, because I've been teaching about this for a while, students have two objections to them. First of all, is this panic of how are the workers going to do this on their own, right? Because they're idiots. They're not prepared well. They didn't go to private school. So how can they possibly run a company without their natural leaders at their side? Well, you shouldn't panic, because they do have leaders. So cooperatives do not mean that it's not anarchy. It's not like, like a construction wharf without an architect. That's not how it works. You still have a hierarchy. It's a company like any other company. You have a team, you have a team leader, then you have a manager, then you have a vice president, then you have a CEO. It's the same pyramid. So you do have a boss. The difference is that you get to choose your boss. You get to elect your boss. So the CEO, it's like the country works, right? You have president, and you have ministers and deputies, etc. And you get to choose them. It's the same in your company. You just get to choose the leader, but you have a leader. And you don't need to come up with the plan. You just need to vote if you like the plan or not. But there are dedicated people who just do management in cooperatives. Second worry that people have with cooperatives is this standard anti-communist idea that, well, everybody's going to earn the same and nobody's going to work, right? You have the same idea about this silliness that there will be no doctors in communism because nobody will study doctor. Well, it's the opposite, it's true, but anyway. The same you can apply to cooperatives. Again, this is not true because you earn whatever you agree to that you're going to earn. In most cases, you're going to earn per how much work you put in, right? If you're half-time, you're going to earn less than a full-time. If you, let's say you make things per piece, if you make more pieces, you might earn more. Or it's whatever you agree to. So if they agree that management earns more, then management earns more, right? Maybe you need to hire some. Maybe, for example, let's say it's a construction company, but they need an accountant and none of them can do accounting. And nobody wants to work there for your wage, then you need to offer a higher wage to the accountant, right? You need to attract them on the labor market like any other company. And so he's going to earn more. So there are pay scales, or they could be. These bosses work too in the production or not? Not necessarily, Ms. Diego. Not necessarily. No. That might be true, but you don't need to work in production if you're the leader. In our faculty, I think all people need to teach, but we're not a cooperative, but we try that principle. But no, that is not so. So anyway, you have pay differentials if you want that. And it's a big mistake that people would be lazy in a cooperative. Matter of fact, the opposite is true. If, let's say you worked in a construction company and your teammate, he's always sleeping in the back. This does not impact you, that your teammate is sleeping in the back. It doesn't matter. If anything, you look good in the eyes of the boss for being better than him and you're going to get promoted faster because your teammate is an idiot, right? In a cooperative, this is a problem. If your teammate is sleeping in the back, that means everybody's earning less money, right? Because you're less productive. Since you're the owner, you don't want your teammate to be sleeping, right? Because he's wasting money, your own money, by doing that. It's wasting time. So in a cooperative, everybody wants everybody else to work because you're in the same boat. So it's a big misunderstanding. Cooperatives are not for weak people. They're not social employment projects. They're not for, weaker parts of the population. There is a certain level of peer pressure that you have in them that you need to keep up with. Because this is what I like about it. I would love, one of the main reasons I would want the faculty to be cooperative is to put pressure on my colleagues to do their part. Right, because right now it's just competition. It's different. So those are two things. People are not lazy, you have a lot of pressure, and you do have leaders. Now, what are the advantages? I'm going to do a small sales pitch, then we'll get to criticism, but let's first start with the advantages. So what's good about a cooperative? Because I do like this idea, and I do want to convince you to try this. Main advantage is that you have bigger employment security. Unless you don't do your job, it's very hard to get fired from a cooperative because all other people need to agree with firing you. So your boss is not going to fire you because, they try to hit on you and you didn't want to kiss him. And he's like, screw you. And he fires you. This happens. That's not going to happen in a cooperative because you would have a big scandal and they would vote the boss away instead of you. So you're going to keep your work as long as you do your work, or, well, the company goes bankrupt. But that is also less likely to happen. This is a very important fact I want to tell you. Cooperatives are more survivable than capitalist companies. A cooperative, this is based on Latin information from a book I read. A cooperative on average has 80% survival rate. What does that mean? That means that if you start a cooperative today, in 20 years, right, what's the chance it's still there? If you start 10 cooperatives today, in 20 years, 8 of them on average will still exist. A capitalist company has between a 20 and 30% survival rate. So if you start 20 companies today, if there's 10 today, 3 are gonna still be there in 20 years. It sounds like little, but if you think about it, if you think of all startups you see in the street, of new restaurants, etc., most don't last 20 years, right? Cooperatives do. And the reason for that is that they're a lot more flexible when things go wrong, because the workers really will try to avoid bankruptcy at all costs, including, let's say, for example, right now with COVID, right? If you have a normal restaurant, you have to keep paying your workers. You can't, so you're gonna go bankrupt, and that's it, right? In the cooperative, the workers might just choose to work for free. And starve a bit, but they want to keep the company alive because it's their company, right? They might choose to work for free, they might work over hours, they might only order food from their own restaurant, right? Whatever it is, but they're gonna hustle and really try to make this work at till the last minute, because their savings is in this company. And this makes it cooperatives survive more. Because you can work with 0 wages in a cooperative, because people might agree to it. And this comes with a higher motivation. Workers are typically more motivated to work in this because they own the company. It matters if the company, if you, I don't know if any of you work, but in your current job, it doesn't really matter what happens to the company or not, if they make profit or not. It doesn't matter to you. Doesn't impact your life. But in a cooperative, if you make profit, you get more money. So that is good. And if you lose money, then you get less wage, because you're all in the same boat. So you want things to go well. And typically people, we talked about with Sophia, are a little bit happier in cooperatives because they're more connected to what they're doing. And they feel, it's a bigger part of your life. It's like you're working your hobby at the same time. So that's about work satisfaction and motivation. Also, this is more theoretical, but I don't have data on this, but you can make a strong case that cooperatives are more environmentally friendly. Environmental in the literal sense of the environment, not necessarily in carbon footprint, because it's not an ideological thing, but in terms of polluting the environment. Why? Because they live in that environment. It's different if the owner of your mining company lives in Atlanta, right? What does he care if we pollute the air here? But if you live next to the mine, you do care a bit more, right? You're not going to destroy your own village over this. So since people live close to their own cooperative, they typically will avoid disastrous decisions, let's say. I'm not saying they're going to have a lower carbon footprint or care more about ecology, but they're not going to pollute their own city. They would be idiots to do so. Some more advantages. Again, interrupt me, whatever you want.
I think
Yes.
I agree. Most of the time, people only care about the money of the company. If they fire me, I don't care. Just give me my liquidation. But in this system, the company is like yours, and you care. You will work harder. I agree.
It's just like you're independent, right? Just with more people. It's like working alone, but then in a team, in a sense. And it's also an opportunity to grow income, and it's an opportunity for entrepreneurship. That's different than how you normally think about it. Let's say that, okay, you're a small class. I don't know if this is gonna work, but let's say there was 20 of you, right? Each year in 5th semester, we do this entrepreneurship course where you have to make your own company and blah, blah, blah. And at the end, I always ask students, because I used to teach this, ask them, do you actually want to do this? And the answer is almost always yes, but we're not going to because we're poor students, right? And that's because none of them has enough money to buy out the others and to like start all of this, because one has to be the boss and then pay the wage of all the other people, right? In a cooperative, you don't have this scenario, so you could actually do it. With 20 people, you probably, even as poor students, could scrape together enough money to start something. Because you start a cooperative by all laying out the initial capital, right? You don't need one person who needs to then hire all the others. So it's a bit easier to start a business as a cooperative, especially as young people. This is the more realistic route, I would say, to becoming an entrepreneur than the capitalist way. And it's a way of saving, right? Because the company, if it's successful to gain money, you own that. You could retreat from that, then you have that money, right? So it's like having a bank account in a way, an extra bank account. Fifth advantage of cooperatives is that, and this is a political thing, if we go back to politics now, if you are, let's say, a mayor of a city, you should encourage cooperatives because they're going to be good for your community, because they're going to keep money in your community. If you have an HEB, that's nice for employment, but all that money is gone, right? All money you pay to HEB that they don't pay in taxes, it's going to taxes and not coming back. Same if you have a gas station from ExxonMobil, that money is going to taxes, right? It's not going to Mexico. But a cooperative, the money stays. It goes to people who live in your community. They're going to spend it in your community. So as a mayor, if you could choose to have a company be a cooperative or not, you want it to be cooperative because you're going to get more money back from that. And it won't move. We have a lot of tragedy here also in Nivelion of investing a lot of money in companies that then leave, or that then, like Kia, bring their own people and then don't hire Mexicans. That's not going to happen with a cooperative. The cooperative cannot leave. Well, it could. If you all decide we all want to live in Thailand and we do this mass vacation immigration thing, you could move your cooperative, but that's not realistic. In all realistic terms, they're not going to leave. Unless they go bankrupt, they're going to stay there. So politically, even if you don't agree, like if you're a liberal or whatever, you would like, it's good news if there's a cooperative in your town. And lastly, this is purely political, they are an experiment in democracy, right? They are a school of democracy, if you want to put it more euphemistically. They're a place where people learn to take decisions and deal with the consequences of them. In our normal democracy, you're not, unless by your drunk Theo, you're not held accountable for your vote, right? You vote something and then, well, things happen and you feel some way about it, but this never comes back to you, right? They're not like, why did you vote for this dude? In a cooperative, you do deal with the consequence. You vote on something, it happens, let's say it goes wrong, well, now you know, you made the wrong choice. I think it's really important. I think one of the flaws of democracy is that we don't do it frequent enough, so people don't get feedback on their vote. In a cooperative, you get instant feedback on your decisions and you need to make them again next month. So you get better at taking decisions. You all need to think as if you're the entrepreneur, even if you're the cleaning person, right? So you become smarter in a way. You learn more about business from being in a cooperative, and you exercise democracy. One big argument here for me is that people are sometimes skeptical about the democratic aspect. They say, oh, well, should workers be able to decide that? But this makes a lot more sense to me than normal. Both make sense to me. I'm a Democrat, but it makes more sense to me than normal democracy. Because what do you think people have a better opinion on? The thing they do every day, or if we should sign a trade deal with China, right? It's logical that the person is more informed of the thing they do every day than some international affair. yet they get to choose about the trade deal, but not, how their own work operates. So if you're going to trust people, I would trust people in any scenario, but I would definitely trust them about the thing they actually know about. So that's the democracy aspect. They have more control also of how it's organized. Let's say you have a cooperative of teachers, and at some point everybody's pregnant, or like 80% of people are pregnant or have young children. You might just want to vote to have, I know, Wednesday afternoon off. You're going to earn less money, but you could do that if you all want that for your kids, right? So yeah, you have a bit more control over how things work. Now, okay, here I'm going to stop with promoting cooperatives, because I could keep going. Now, what are the troubles with a cooperative? There are none. They're perfect, but no. One of the inherent problems is starting one. As I said, it's easier to start it if you start from scratch, but some things are easier than others. It is easier to start a cooperative in a low capital sector. Matter of fact, it's easiest in the service sector because there is no significant capital. The main investment are the people doing the service, right? For example, if you would have a cooperative of nurses, it's about the nurses. If you have the nurses, you can do the job. Okay, you need like some equipment, but if you want to care for people in their house, you don't need much more than the people, and you are the people. So this is easy to start. You don't really need a boss if you would have nurses. The same if you would be graphic designers. You don't really need an owner. For what? Right? Okay, you need laptops. You have them anyway. So you just start this. It's easy. Same with teaching, gardening, all this type of jobs where guards, security guard, where you are essentially the service. This is easy to start. You just need to agree. People just get tricked on thinking they need an investor, but you could just do this. It's a bit harder in very capital intense things. It's hard to start an oil refinery as a cooperative because you need $30 billion entrance fee, right? Most people don't have $30 billion laying around to build the Dos Bocas refinery. So here it's possible, and this exists, not the oil refinery, but although Pemex, I think, grew out of this. But anyway, you can have big factories you can have car factories that are cooperatives. You can have banks that are cooperatives. For example, the biggest bank in the Netherlands, Rabobank, is a cooperative. This is possible, but for like big industry, the only way to really do it is with government help. Typically, these cooperatives come out of bankrupt capitalist companies. So you have a car factory. It goes bankrupt. Now what happens, for example, Argentina did this. Whenever a big company went bankrupt, the state would buy it and then try to sell it to the workers. And then, the workers, they basically have to pour all their savings in this, but they can, there's enough of them. And the government will sell them for whatever price they can get for it. And then the workers have the factory, right? Then it's difficult because they need to save the factory then. That might or might not work. But that's how you would start a big company. You cannibalize a capitalist one. But that needs the government to happen. The government needs to step in and make this transition. Argentina has nice laws on this. So you need government support for bigger things. You can start it on your own with service, and like basically the third sector is not that hard. If it involves production, it's a bit hard when you get to heavy industry. So you need government support, and then we get to the political question of it. As an idea, cooperatives fit in very nice with other ideologies. It evidently fits in with communism and socialism, because that's where it comes from. But even liberals can like it if you pitch it right. because you talk about entrepreneurship, right? We're going to stimulate entrepreneurship in San Pedro, and that's why they're mayor. We need the people to learn about this, and that's why we need cooperatives. You could pitch that. Conservatives can like it in the sense that, well, it boosts community and it boosts responsibility. Say, well, these lazy workers, what if we let them in charge? Then they'll know, right? You could pitch it in a conservative way, that people should have responsibility for their fate. So ideologically, there's no real problem, but there is a problem in power politics, because cooperatives are not in the interest of the capitalist class. So if you want to really boost this as a government and put real money behind it, well, there's going to be some drama, right? Because you will prioritize one sector over the other. You're not treating sectors equal. You're going to give tax breaks to this company, but not that one. And you can do that, but there will be complaints and denuncios and denouncements. Anyway, the PAN will sue you if you will try it. Also, democracies are not for you if you hate talking to people. And a lot of people hate talking to people, right? Cooperatives are nice if you like people, if you like debating, if you like democracy, if you don't hate meetings, because you have a lot of meetings if you're in a cooperative. Even if you're the cleaning person, you still need to sit through all these board meetings. If you hate that, if you just want to do 9-to-5 job and not care about things, then cooperatives are not for you. And a lot of people hate this, so it can be annoying. And also, it's a bit harder in a globalized economy. It's not impossible to start a cooperative. There are examples of multinational cooperatives. For example, you have this, I'll show you a video if we have time later, but you have a Spanish cooperative that makes fridges. They're the biggest fridge manufacturer in Europe. They have factories in Mexico. So they're Spanish, but then the factories in Mexico are also cooperatives, but they're part of this larger multinational. So they feed the mother cooperative, etc. So it's possible. It's a bit difficult, right, to be in the same boat with people in Thailand, but you could do it. It's just hard. So it's not that simple to do, but it is possible. Do you have any questions about cooperatives before I move on? No. Okay, that's possible. Then I wanted to talk a bit about other things, just to get you thinking about ideologies without having them in power, right? How do you take elements of the ideology, but you use it outside of it? So other communist things that are not in communism that you can think about in our world without the revolution are basically based on other commons, right? Other things we share, other things we cooperate in. One principle that is very interesting for Mexico is the idea of sharing the income of common resources. So the country will have certain things that you could argue belong to all people, right? And you could derive an income from that. It's not the same as universal basic income. You might have heard of that term. This is where everybody gets money every month. Universal basic income is based on taxes. So you take money from people and then you give it back. That's not this. This is when you have a specific resource that is nationalized and you split the profits. So, thank you. One example of this is the Alaska oil dividend. Alaska is not a socialist state. It is a deeply Republican conservative state in the United States. But they have like a grain of communism in the sense that there's a tax on the oil that is being extracted in Alaska. And that tax goes to all people. So at the end of the year, all the people gain a bit of money that was made from the oil. This is on average $1,000 per year that all people in Alaska get each year. That is communist in a certain way, right? And that's in the US, in a very conservative state. We could do that in Mexico. You could have a lithium tax that then pays a lithium dividend if we would nationalize lithium. Or we could do it even with Pemex, right? That's possible. Another example, this is a bit far-fetched. This is from my international law class. I'm not going to go too much detail, but you have something called the International Seabed Association, which is located in Jamaica. This organization regulates the bottom of the ocean, not of the sea, but of the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. If you want to mine the bottom of the ocean, which doesn't belong to any country, the bottom of the ocean belongs to all of us and nobody, because you can't go there. But anyway, it belongs to the earth. If you want to mine that, you pay a very heavy tax, and that money is redistributed to all countries in the world. So if some Chinese mining company goes there and they mine, I don't know, diamonds, then that money, part of it goes to us, to Cambodia, to all countries. This doesn't actually work because the Americans block it. So this is not happening, but it exists. They're still waiting for customers, but the Americans are against this. But anyway, it exists. It's a bit like social service, like it's a building full of people waiting for something to happen, but it exists. And it has this communist principle. So that's one thing, sharing in a resource. We could do this. The other is the internet. The internet is a natural common, right? The internet, at least in theory, belongs to no one because it's made out of connections between people. You are part of the internet, your computer is. And in some old romantic days before 2005, the internet actually belonged to people and it was a democratic space. Then when you gain consciousness, things like Google happened, and Facebook and Apple and Amazon. And now the internet is owned by 4 or 5 companies. Or I'd say 90% of the websites you visit, right, are owned by them. But you have some rebellious websites who are still public. One of them is Wikipedia. I think most of you know that Wikipedia is a sort of cooperative, but of volunteers. Wikipedia is owned by the users, and is made by users. That is communism in a sense. This is why I always support Wikipedia. Most academics will advise you not to use it. I say screw that. Use Wikipedia. Support the people. This is great. I wish YouTube was like Wikipedia. There's no need for YouTube to not be like Wikipedia, right? The content is made by people. You know, it could work perfectly without Google, and it used to, but then Google bought it. You could do that again. You could nationalize YouTube, or you could, whatever, corporatize YouTube. And you have open source software, etc., etc. There's a small bit of communism still surviving. And you could also have it in terms of knowledge. So knowledge, you could argue, is a common. Knowledge is a common because it doesn't disappear when I share it. I shared with you my knowledge of cooperatives today. I did not now forget them because I told you about them, right? It just multiplied. So you could simply share knowledge, and actually you have a human right to this. I don't know if you know this, but your last human right in your list of human rights, not your last, number I think 29 or 28, is the right to scientific knowledge. You have a right to the fruits, I think it's from the fruits of scientific advancement, which I interpret in that you should be able to read any research you want. But it's not the case. You probably have noticed this when you try to make an essay or something and you look for information and you Google and you find some article and you're like, yeah, I'm going to read this. And it says, if you want to read this, you have to pay us $47 for 12 hours. You better read fast, right? Mr. Diego.
Regarding that thing, there's this page that its name is CHOOP. I can share the link. That it's like I don't know, software. It's a web page that you put the link or the DOI of an article that it's blocked and it opens like free.
Wow, I need this. I need
Yeah.
this. Because this is real. Like, okay, I'm a researcher. I deal a lot with this. I don't know how much you care about this, but I care. The difference in coming from Europe to here is that I now see all these paywalls. Previously, my old university would take care of that. But now I cannot access 60% of the stuff I see. And that's a big disadvantage for the third world. There's simply no inequality in science. People here, we don't have the same information as people in the US have. So this, I will really look at that thing. But anyway, there's no reason for this to happen. The only reason why this happens is greed, because these publishers are companies, they're commercial companies, and they need to make money. The same with handbooks, right? Our library stopped buying books in like '94 or something, so we don't have much updated things. But every time I want to use a handbook, I can only buy one book a semester for my courses for you guys, because it cost me like $100. Anyway, this could be open access. It's perfectly possible if it was a bit sponsored. For example, our faculty has a journal. This doesn't cost anyone money. This is just, we do it. This is in our free time. We review it, we make it. That's what we do. So you could do that too for other journals. Or you could use Diego's link, which is more it's more anarchism than communism in that case. All right, so these are just some ideas there. Any reactions or comments on this, or things you can think of yourself, like this could be an element of communism outside of communism? No?
Well, I do have a doubt regarding or talking about the faculty, for example. How can the cooperative could work if it's not like, as long as you as a teacher work, you produce a certain output. Like the faculty depends on our pays and sponsors of Cemex and I don't know. But how could work in that case?
So, well, we do have output, right? It's teaching. There's a service that you apparently want that we provide. So, well, the faculty have two main sources of income. One is tuition, and the other is just government, because this is subsidized still. So you would keep the government subsidy, and you would use the tuition. The difference would be is that we would have a clue of where this money is going, because things don't make sense and where the money goes with us. Especially money disappears now and then without explanation. So we would work, you would get paid per hour, or that pay could vary. If we would make more money, it would be higher. It kind of, in theory, it's already in theory democratic. In theory, the faculty is democratic. We elect the director, except that we elect him from a one-person vote. So it's choose Abram or Abram. That's literally, and that's how it's always been in the last 30 years. There's never been an election with two candidates. So yeah, that was a nice try. But in theory, you have the democratic aspect. We don't have the ownership part. So that would be the difference. And on a, let's say, on a research level, you would have a research group. You would get money from projects, and you would put that money in a pot, right? And that's how you would pay wages from that. So you would share a bit your income, if you get a lot from external sources, with the others. But it's possible. It's perfectly possible. It's not going to happen, but we also would have a talk about pay scales if this would be the case, because pay scales are or funny.
Doctor, did you remember this thing called Se Buscan las Cuotas?
No, what was it?
The in the semester where the world fuck up, these students that were calling for transparency from the faculty, it was like we got to the how you say, with the director and give
Yes,
a pliego petitorio, and then they
I
try
remember
to
this. Yeah.
Genaro and no, Alexis had problems with the director and you helped
Yes.
him. Yeah, well, Sofia and I kind of created that.
Yeah. No, I was involved in it. I saved you. I don't know if you know this, but Abraham was gonna fire everybody. So I remember being in his office. Are we recording me? No, right? I remember being in his office, and we were talking about something completely different. At some point, he's clicking on his laptop, and he turns the screen to me. It's like, "Do you know this guy?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's Alexis. I hate him. I want to get rid of him." I was like, "Oh, I invented the story. I never lie. This is the first time I lie. I pretended Alexis was with me with Morena, because I was back then. I was like the in charge of Morena Youth. It's like, yeah, you might get trouble with Morena if you fire him, and that convinced him not to do it. It's not true because he's with a different party, but um, and anyway, but I don't know how he would have done it though. But yeah, that was weird. But it was a
Thank
good
you.
thing
Thanks
though,
for
because
saving us.
Abram wasn't angry at you doing this. Abram was angry at how it was done. He was angry at, because in his mind he gave in to at least half of it, and then they put up a post still complaining about it, and that's what he was pissed off at, because he found it humiliating. He's like, I gave in and you're still complaining, so now I look weak. Um, but people were not that angry about the initiative. I think, yeah. But you
Uh,
have to be diplomatic.
did you know that that El Horizonte post was removed?
No.
Yeah, well, it was, maybe there was some money in that sense, because now you enter to the link and it's like erased.
Uh, well, it was a good initiative. There was just you. What was unclear a bit is if this initiative was meant as a protest or if he actually wanted it. And if he actually wanted, I mean, and Brown's not going to leave, right? You need to work with him. So it could have been a bit more diplomatic, but it was a good thing. There was things were going to happen, but then the pandemic happened, and it was an interesting moment. And it's a step forward. This was not possible in the past. If this was, you never knew him, but Tames, the guy before, this would not have happened. You would have never gotten to speak to him. It would not have flied. So I know I'm optimistic about this event. I think it was a good thing. Anyway, I don't know why I risked my job here by talking about this. So I want to show you a video in our last 30 minutes about cooperatives to prove that it's real. It's not just something I made up. I will show you a video, or at least 20 minutes of it. This is a bit older videos from 2000, I think 2013. It's about cooperatives in Europe. They exist in Latin America, very big ones. For example, trash collection in Brazil is done by a cooperative, one of the biggest in the world. They have hundreds of thousands of members. So this does exist, but this is about Europe, and it shows you, I think, 6 or so cooperatives and a bit their story. All right, let us. Let me try to share this screen with you. Now I need to include the sound. Let's see. Do you hear anything? Well, there's no sound now, but
After the Lehman Brothers bankruptcy, there is now
Yes, teacher.
okay. Do you hear it loud enough?
Iceland's
Okay.
government collapse on
Let's
Monday,
watch this for
the
about
first
20
government
minutes.
to fall as a direct result of the global economic turmoil.
And let's skip this intro.
Thousands of protesters took to the streets of Europe today
Let's skip to this dude.
and maintain long-term jobs.
Donc voilà, donc l'usine se trouve limitrophe de la ville de Dormans, où on fabrique beaucoup de champagne. Et par contre, c'est une ville très peu industrielle. Et on a pris une décision de mettre au capital pour que l'usine puisse repartir et qu'on puisse avoir du travail, parce que le travail à l'heure d'aujourd'hui, il n'y en a pas beaucoup, quoi.
Bruno is a worker at Fonderie de Laine, one of the 150 enterprises transformed into cooperatives in France since the beginning of the crisis in 2008. The foundry, specialised in the production of aluminium pieces for the motor industry, had increasing difficulties due to the default of some customers. In September 2008, just after the fall of Lehman Brothers, orders decreased dramatically. The business entered into liquidation in early 2009, but 26 of its workers decided to transform it into a cooperative in order to save their jobs.
On a fait appel à repreneurs et vu qu'on tombait sur des requins qui voulaient piller l'entreprise, nous avons préféré la reprendre. Donc il y avait plusieurs solutions pour la reprendre, soit la reprendre en société traditionnelle, et le but était de reprendre l'entreprise avec des gens motivés et qui ont tous envie de tirer dans le même sens. Donc l'aspect coopératif nous a été beaucoup plus opportun qu'une société traditionnelle. Je me suis approché de mon groupement coopérateur de mon secteur et sous quelques jours, j'avais un représentant du mouvement coopératif qui était dans nos locaux.
Pendant 2 mois, on s'est rencontrés 2 fois par semaine à peu près, et puis on a travaillé sur le projet, on a travaillé surtout sur les prévisions, on a travaillé sur en fait la constitution d'un dossier qui permettait à un moment de présenter un projet de reprise qui mettait en évidence l'outil de travail de la fonderie, qui mettait en évidence les salariés et la façon dont ils souhaitaient reprendre la société et qui mettait en évidence les prévisions économiques, donc ces prévisions économiques surtout qui étaient appuyées par des intentions, des lettres d'intention qui étaient apportées par les clients, les futurs clients. Ils avaient beaucoup d'informations à demander à l'extérieur, donc on a essayé de les conseiller pour aller voir différents représentants, différentes institutions, différents partenaires pour qu'ils puissent aller présenter leurs projets.
The regional unions of worker cooperatives present in France play a key advisory role in the process of transforming conventional enterprises into cooperatives.
Just to interrupt here, my favorite part about any documentaries is where people pretend to work. And like you see them stare at a laptop and such. I always love this. Anyway.
Alors les principaux problèmes qu'on a rencontrés pour la reprise de l'entreprise, je pensais que ça aurait été les problèmes de trésorerie, donc de financement au niveau des banques, et ça s'est fait relativement facilement, surtout que les salariés amenaient un capital relativement important pour l'entreprise. Donc ça a été bouclé très rapidement. Le gros souci que nous avons rencontré, c'est surtout au niveau du mandataire judiciaire, où c'est beaucoup plus compliqué, où il y a plus un intérêt financier pour lui qu'un intérêt humain, donc de reprise d'entreprise ou de sauvegarde d'emploi.
After the transformation into a cooperative, the workers had to tackle the problems that had led to the crisis. The enterprise had been almost entirely focused on the automobile sector, and it had very few customers. Therefore, they have had to manufacture new products.
Monsieur, dame, bonjour. Bonjour.
Bon, messieurs, je tenais à vous informer que j'ai énormément de bonnes nouvelles aujourd'hui. On est validé comme fournisseur potentiel chez le client. Suite à mon déplacement en Allemagne, j'ai été contacté par un fournisseur de mobilier urbain qui nous permettent de continuer dans notre politique de diversification. Aujourd'hui, on fait énormément de commercial, on fait énormément de salons pour se faire connaître et faire connaître notre savoir-faire. Aujourd'hui, on se développe, on est à notre troisième bilan positif. On a une hausse de chiffre d'affaires l'année dernière de 8%. Pour 2012, on devrait faire entre 15 et 20% de hausse de chiffre d'affaires.
Disons, avant, il n'y avait pas de boulot, on aurait été tous été au chômage. Donc voilà, quoi, c'est une bonne chose, quoi, l'usine est reprise.
Et c'est vrai que si la fonderie n'avait pas reprise, c'était la perte d'un savoir-faire industriel qui aurait été repris a priori par des concurrents, et des concurrents, semble-t-il, qui se situaient hors de nos frontières, ou du moins hors de France. Et la chance effectivement d'avoir pu travailler à ce projet de reprise, c'est aussi d'avoir permis à l'Aisne de conserver effectivement ce patrimoine.
On crée du pouvoir d'achat et on crée de l'emploi. Et quand on crée de l'emploi, déjà, nous en interne, on crée aussi de la sous-traitance extérieure. Donc aussi bien les commerçants que les petits artisans, les salariés font fonctionner le commerce de proximité.
All right, let's go to the next one.
Alors c'est vrai que le modèle coopératif, l'avantage...
Mutsynianka is located in a small village in the Carpathian Mountains in the south of Poland, near the border with Slovakia. The enterprise, which employs 67 workers, was founded in 1951 as a service cooperative, and now its main activity is the production of mineral water. In the 90s, the Polish cooperative movement experienced a huge restructuring process due to the change from a planned economy to a market one.
Rok 1989 nie był dobrym, przełomowym rokiem dla spółdzielczości, dlatego że przemiany ekonomiczne, jakie zaczęły się w Polsce, powodowały, że spółdzielczość nie mogła się w nowych warunkach odnaleźć. Firmy były małe, niedoinwestowane, o niekiedy dużych brakach kadrowych, kredytach, których odsetki rosły lawinowo i niestety część spółdzielni nie poradziła sobie ze zmianą, musiała upaść, rozwiązać się bądź po prostu sprzedać. W spółdzielni zmieniło się to, że każdy członek w jakiś sposób zrozumiał, że od niego zależy to, co dzieje się na zakładzie, czyli produkcja, jakość, sprzedaż. Nie było podziału na my i oni, jak kiedyś funkcjonowało we wszystkich firmach i państwowych, i spółdzielczych.
In turn, the cooperative has not suffered from the global crisis that flared up in 2008.
Myślę, że kryzys nam nie przeszkodził, a wręcz odwrotnie, mieliśmy możliwość pokazania się na rynku z jak najlepszej strony, zdobycia nowych klientów i ugruntowaliśmy naszą pozycję jako marka, jako firma.
The cooperative has continued to have a major impact on the local community.
Przede wszystkim poprzez tworzenie miejsc pracy, to jest niezwykle istotne, również poprzez dawanie możliwości tworzenia miejsc pracy w otoczeniu, w transporcie, jak również w innych usługach, bo jedno miejsce pracy w Muszyniance obliczamy, że daje 2 miejsca pracy w usługach dokrewnych. To jest niezwykle ważne.
wspomagamy finansowo szpital, szkoły, kluby sportowe, organizacje młodzieżowe. Wszystko to, co tutaj dzieje się, zawsze jest naszym udziałem.
Like in all cooperatives, members are responsible for the initiatives taken by the enterprise. All decisions are taken democratically on the basis of the one person, one vote principle.
Jako członek spółdzielni z długoletnim stażem pracy czuję się bardzo dobrze. Praca członka spółdzielni polega na tym, że jest to praca dla nas, dla członków spółdzielni.
Na pewno bardzo trudną stroną bycia członkiem spółdzielni jest podejmowanie decyzji. Każda decyzja ma zasadniczy wpływ na byt całej spółdzielni, byt mnie, jak i wszystkich członków spółdzielni, więc każdorazowe przekonanie członków spółdzielni do pójścia w tym kierunku lub innym wiąże się z tym, że jeśli będzie to zła decyzja, możemy stracić na tym bardzo wiele.
Podejmując decyzje w zakresie działalności, bierzemy pod uwagę tu i teraz, ale również to, co będzie w przyszłości. Demokratyczny system podejmowania decyzji ma podstawowe plusy i minusy. Plusem jest to, że wszyscy członkowie mają prawo do podejmowania decyzji dotyczących rozwoju spółdzielni, przyszłości, inwestycji, jak również podziału wyników, które zostaną wypracowane.
This one I'm gonna skip because it's a bit vague. They're like a hybrid. But
In Italy, a new type
we
of
will
cooperative
skip to
emerged in the
Spain.
70s, called social
Who cares about
cooperatives.
Italy anyway?
Today, they have evolved into a large economic and social reality throughout the whole country.
All right. This is the one that's probably most interesting to you.
An emblematic example of a cooperative group is Mondragon, in the Basque region of Spain, with over 100 cooperatives, mainly in industrial sectors.
So this city is a
All
cooperative.
this started in 1943, when a Catholic priest established a vocational school. Later, a handful of students created the first industrial cooperative, which was followed by a few others. Together, these few cooperatives established a cooperative bank. Other common activities were set up, in particular in education, research, and welfare insurance. In the early 80s, the region was struck by a big economic crisis, but Mondragon suffered virtually no unemployment. Then the group developed considerably with the creation in 1991 of the corporation as a strategy for internationalization and horizontal integration. Then the global crisis struck.
En octubre del 2008 fijamos unas medidas en común y esas se centraron básicamente primero en la actitud, con qué actitud nos enfrentábamos a la crisis. Y nuestra actitud, el primer punto era la responsabilidad, ser responsables y asumir que la crisis también nos afectaba a todos. Una actitud de serenidad, porque si es bien cierto que nos iba a afectar, también iba a afectar al resto del mundo, también iba a afectar a nuestros competidores y en derivada, si hacíamos las cosas mejor que otros, podíamos salir con éxito de esta crisis y también con una actitud de intercooperación, de trabajo y de flexibilidad.
Para estar 50, 60 años tenemos que durar los próximos 2. Por lo tanto, no nos podemos morir en el camino. Si somos conscientes de que algunos empleos se van a perder, pues hay que darle aquí a la cabeza para construir.
En el corto, para nosotros era fundamental mantener al máximo posible el desarrollo de puestos de trabajo y no olvidarnos del futuro, centrarnos en la innovación para ir transformando nuestros negocios y a la vez en la internacionalización.
tenemos una gran facilidad de acomodarnos. Incluso desde nuestras herramientas de intercooperación social, movemos gente de una cooperativa a otra. Todo esto pues suena muy fácil, pero es muy difícil de hacerlo. Y bueno, pues eso nos permite, digamos, reaccionar a corto.
Entonces, lo que nosotros hacemos es definir la problemática de desempleo de cada una de las cooperativas, y hay algunas cooperativas en la asociación, en la corporación, que están bien situadas, es decir, no tienen desempleo y por tanto tienen posibilidad de ofrecer empleo, y hay otras cooperativas que tienen desempleo y que afecta, como digo, a los socios trabajadores.
En una situación bastante mala, cuando te dicen que vas a ir reubicado a otra cooperativa, pues al final es una esperanza, ¿no? Yo la otra empresa, la otra cooperativa en la que trabajaba, pues por la situación económica iba mal y bueno, pues al final se tuvo que cerrar. Entonces, desde ese punto de vista, pues a mí el cambio me ha venido a mejor, pues me ha supuesto una seguridad a corto y yo creo que a largo plazo también.
Hemos llegado a tener en esta crisis cerca de 500 personas que eran excedentes en sus cooperativas, pero que han sido reubicadas en otras cooperativas del grupo. Entonces eso es una ventaja competitiva porque les da a los trabajadores, a los socios trabajadores, seguridad de empleo, que es un elemento muy importante de motivación.
The group has also put in place more long-term measures to combat the crisis, particularly in the field of internationalization. It has developed a whole range of financial tools for this purpose.
Pues si teníamos que ir a Chequia o a China o a la India, pues esas inversiones siempre normalmente se han ido con apoyo de estos fondos. Antes se suponía que cuando uno vendía algo, el cliente tenía dinero para pagarte. Pues hoy eso no es así. Es decir, hoy uno vende y el cliente no tiene dinero y al cliente hay que financiarle, ¿no? Y bueno, pues eso empieza a cambiar las cosas y necesitamos instrumentos, pues bueno, que yo estoy esperanzado y creo firmemente que los vamos a construir, ¿eh? Pero bueno, todavía estamos en ese camino.
Hay que estar en el mundo para seguir estando aquí. 68% de nuestras ventas estuvieron en el exterior, por tanto, nosotros vivimos de la actividad internacionalizada. Tenemos casi 100 empresas, 94 empresas instaladas en el exterior. Los hechos demuestran que en aquellas actividades se ha internacionalizado, soportan mejor el desarrollo de las actividades aquí, tanto en cuanto estamos también fuera.
Supone el 3% del PIB vasco, ¿no? Por lo tanto, la aportación es una aportación intra, es una aportación dentro de Euskadi, ¿no? A lo que supone su economía, su riqueza, su bienestar, porque empleo es bienestar, empleo, riqueza. Y además nos ha situado en el mundo a los vascos en primera división, ¿no?
Pero nosotros no vamos fuera con la intención de explotar oportunamente o con carácter de oportunidad un momento determinado y luego irnos. Si vamos a algún sitio es para quedarnos y para desarrollarnos también allí. Lo que ocurre es que el proceso de cooperativización en cualquier sitio del mundo, también aquí, es un proceso lento que supone que los propios trabajadores tomen conciencia y se sientan protagonistas y quieran asumir ese protagonismo.
Innovation is at the heart of Mondragon Corporation, which is making a renewed effort in the field of technological innovation. In 1974, the group had already created the cooperative Ikelan, one of its industrial research centers.
Pensamos que para poder salir de la situación difícil en la que nos encontramos, no solo tenemos que mejorar los productos que estamos ofertando actualmente, sino nuevos productos que nos permitan competir con nuevos mercados que nos están llegando desde el exterior. Y entre estos dos nuevos productos, estos dos nuevos sectores de actividad, cabe destacar la salud, los servicios sociosanitarios, la teleasistencia desde el hogar y el campo de la energía.
Queremos ir con los tres elementos. Queremos ir con la educación, con personas formadas, con negocios en el mundo de la salud y con estos centros de investigación que soportan ese triángulo de negocios, educación y centros de investigación.
A good example of this innovation triangle is the recently launched Mondragon electrical car project, in which over 20 cooperatives of the group are taking part.
Muchos automóviles que hoy andan tienen muchísimos componentes nuestros, pero todavía podemos subir en la escala de valor.
El CityCar es un proyecto muy importante de capacitación. Lo que tenemos ahora es una plataforma sobre la cual podemos integrar y experimentar los diferentes desarrollos que realizan tanto las cooperativas como los centros de investigación.
Education and training, which are at the root of the Mondragon experience, still remain a key instrument in combating the crisis.
Tenemos que ir formando nuevas personas porque las necesidades de las empresas de hoy, las exitosas, esas necesitan personas distintas a las que necesitaban hace 15 años.
El País Vasco es un país pobre. No tenemos una buena orografía para tener agricultura, se puede ver. No tenemos recursos naturales, no tenemos petróleo. Hoy hace un buen día, pero tampoco tenemos un buen clima para generar turismo. Lo único valor que tenemos somos las personas. Las personas y nuestro trabajo y la posibilidad de hacer ese trabajo en común. Para que este trabajo en común sea lo más fructífero posible, es muy importante, es imprescindible la formación y la educación.
Tenemos que modificar, ser innovadores en la formación que estamos dando, ¿no? Hoy necesitamos mucho más emprendedores, promotores, y tenemos que tener, no solo formar gente que sea capaz de saber de mecánica, ingenieros que vayan a un taller y sepan desarrollar máquinas, sino necesitamos gente que sea capaz de crear negocios y emprender negocios, ¿no? Y que se sepa mover por el mundo con facilidad.
Mondragon University is partly focused on entrepreneurial and cooperative management through new degree courses and studies.
Lo que he aprendido en este grado, en este año que llevo, es que, aparte de mí, lo que quiero es que el resto de mi alrededor también tenga totales capacidades. Porque eso es lo importante. Al final, yo no voy a poder ser el mejor en todo, pero sí que puedo tener contactos que pueden ser de los mejores.
All key strategic decisions in the Mondragon Corporation are decided in a democratic and participative fashion. The group has drafted a whole set of rules in which each cooperative is autonomous, but also discusses all the major orientations of the group. This entire process culminates in the Mondragon Congress.
El Congreso es el punto de encuentro del conjunto de las cooperativas y de los cooperativistas del proyecto Mondragón. De manera que aquello que va al Congreso ha tenido todo un proceso concatenado para garantizar que aquello que se debate y se trata en el Congreso tenga todos los ingredientes que cualquier socio de trabajo de la corporación haya querido aportar a ese proyecto.
Los socios trabajadores nuestros tienen claro que son socios trabajadores, por tanto, trabajadores y empresarios.
Aquí todos trabajamos para conseguir un objetivo común, que es ser competitivos para mantener el empleo de todas las personas que trabajamos en la empresa, desde la mano de obra directa, que se dedica básicamente a añadir componentes a un producto final, hasta las personas de innovación, que se dedican a diseñar nuevos complementos innovadores para los productos que fabricamos.
All right, I'm going to stop it here because it just is more of the same after this. Let me stop sharing. How do I do that? All right. So there you are. There we are. What do you think? What you just watched?
It's amazing, teacher. It's kind of interesting.
The propaganda is getting through to you. Is there anything that stands out?
It's almost Mondragon is a city, right?
Yes.
But I think it's almost like has all the potential to be a communist city.
I guess, yeah.
By the way, the País Vasco depends on the Spain government, or it's like independent?
No, it's not independent. It had some fights in the past, because these people made a good effort of speaking Spanish, but they also speak other languages there. But no, they're part of Spain. They feel very independent, but they're not in practice.
I think that if in the future we have more cooperatives, like unintentional, the model system is going to change a little bit because like school is a real, like they prepared for the real world. And here in school, for example, if teammate does not work, you can do anything. But if in the real life, like a student, co-worker doesn't work, you can like te conviene like apoyarlo. And like right now, you don't have that incentive. You just be like, well, I'm going to work on my own, or I'm going to fight.
Yeah, so you all heard this I talked to us before. You all heard this story about the tech professor that turns a classroom into communism, and then everybody's grade goes down, right? Well, this is what actually would happen, right? If you would actually do that. So it's a nice counter thought experiment, and indeed a lot depends on incentives, I think. Mr. Diego.
Teacher, what do you think about the what I understood of the video is that the company owns the school or the university, right? So what do you think about that? That they are teaching their future workers? Well,
I think that works fine for them. Tech is also owned by companies, right? And so is Udem. Udem is technically independent, but really Udem is ruled by Alpha, the head of the board and the rector, or director and vice director, former vice director of Alpha. The disadvantage is that I see with this is that you're going to shape your curriculum really based on the industry. You're going to shape your curriculum based on economic needs rather than academic disciplines. Now, I'm an academic from social sciences, so I of course don't like that. I just like to teach disciplines, sociology, psychology, But for them it makes much sense, right? You don't need to go there. You probably have a Basque State University too that you could go to. I think it's smart to do for them. And I guess it's interesting for the students, but I think they're of course going to be limited in what they're going to teach because you have economic interest in there. And the students are clients, not members of the cooperative, I think. So.
Doctor, I have a question. If it will be possible that workers, instead of creating their own cooperative, they took a company that already exists?
Yeah, well, that's the communist plan, right? Then we go back to real communism. That's what the revolution is. You overthrow the boss, you lock him out of his office, and you take the company.
Just like a strike. You go into a strike, and then the boss says okay, I'm going to leave.
Yes, that's the normal communist route of revolution. You do that.
It has happened right now in our world.
Yeah, it happens sometimes with almost bankrupt companies. So you have companies where they're profitable. So imagine you have a company that's part of a larger group, right? Capitalist groups don't try to make profit, they try to make maximum profit, which are different things. So sometimes you're going to have a division. Let's say it's a hotel chain, okay? You have a hotel in the city. It breaks even or it's slightly profitable, but it is more profitable to the company to sell that hotel and invest that money in another city where there's more tourism. So they might just quit their own business to use that capital somewhere else. That happens all the time, that companies liquidate profitable sub-companies because they could make more profit with that money elsewhere. In some of those cases, the workers said, oh, you don't, and they rebelled and they made drama, and then the company, I guess, didn't want to deal with the drama and let go of them. And they took the hotel. This is from Greece. That I'm drawing this example. In Greece, I remember this case the other day. They took the hotel, and now it's their hotel, and it breaks even. So you could do that, yes. But if you would try that today with Cemex, of course you would. I don't know how AMLO would react, but Guardia Civil will definitely come, or state police will definitely come and try to kick you out of there. But yeah, then we're back to the Marxist route. That is possible. That's the plan of communists. But I'm teaching it more as an entrepreneurial thing. But yeah.
And has any country like made a policy about giving the workers money to create their own cooperative, or is that really radical for them?
One company, one country, but this is not a shining example, but Venezuela actively encouraged people to rise up and take their companies, right? Venezuela is not a communist country. You have Starbucks and McDonald's in Venezuela, but they did go through a wave of trying to make as much cooperatives as possible. So they heavily pushed it. Argentina 10 years ago heavily pushed this. So yeah, there were some companies that some countries that chose to do this, that chose to promote the idea, and they got halfway, let's say, in doing that. But in most countries, you have some kind of passive tax breaks or things, but it's not a very active policy. Because again, as a local government, this is good for you if you have a cooperative. Mr. Diego Martinez, you have your hand raised. Sorry.
Sorry, I didn't pull it down late.
Oh, okay. Well, so yes, Sophia, if you want to become an organizer and creator of cooperatives, you could go into the call center and try to convince them to do this. Yeah. I think the easier road is to start one. But so if you want to transition towards communism in a peaceful way, you first of all need to win elections, let's say 7 times in a row. Like you need a lot of time. Let's say you need to rule for 40 years, and you need to push cooperatives. And that's what I would do if I would be trying to do this. You would try to convince people to start companies. Every time a company goes bankrupt, you buy them and you try to sell it back to the workers. And that's how you slowly change your economy. And then in the final year, the guns come out and you make the final push. But anyway, that was communism. We're leaving communism now. Next time we're talking about conservatism. We go back to the right, to some proper politics, not this radical stuff. So that is for next Tuesday. I'll see you then. All right.
Thank you,
Take care.
teacher.
Thanks, Doctor.
Bye.
Great
Bye.
class.
Have a nice day.
Good.